Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Medieval Buzz with Rachel from the Creative Contessa and Philip from Irish Medieval History. We've been on a break from this series for the last month, but we're ready to jump back into it because, Philip, my goodness, there has been some buzz, hasn't there, lately?
Yeah, it's been a bit wild, all right, but it always gets wild this time of year, especially when we start going back into reenactment events and stuff again. There's always
Yeah.
plenty to talk about. And then the weather always clears up as well, so the archaeologists are able to get back out into the field and start getting back to work again, which we're seeing in Ireland. I don't know about the rest of Europe, but I'm assuming you're keeping somewhat of an eye on Asia and Europe, but
Yeah, there's been some great finds in
great.
in Germany, of
Mm.
all places. So yeah, we've got some good stuff to talk about, and then you started the historian's equivalent of a rap battle without meaning to recently.
Yeah, yeah. I can talk about it around this time because those people are asleep in bed, so they'll probably not
Right,
watch
right.
this. But if it was the other channel, no, I wouldn't be able to talk about that. But I can bitch and talk about it here because those
You
people don't
can.
watch those people don't watch this facts. It's all good.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah. God, I won't be naming names. But
No need to name
yeah,
names.
it was. I don't even think it was that big of a deal. You watched the short. It was
I
the
didn't
one
think
on.
so either.
Yeah.
I thought it was a gentleman's discussion about different views on terminology, and it
Mm,
turns out that's not how it was received. But
yeah.
from an outsider perspective, just watching your short, I
Mm.
thought it was respectful, and I mean, God, especially the way historians can go after each other. Holy shit! I
That's what
have
I
seen
was
his
thinking.
I have seen historians take cage match with
Mm,
words, right? So
yeah.
what? Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Do you want to set? Do you want to without names? Do you want to explain the basic debate that's kind of ongoing in the
Well,
Irish history world
I wouldn't say it was a debate
or
because you lost me. So,
discussion? Oh
yeah,
well,
well, there is my side of the debate that's long buried now because Mr. So and so, we'll call him Mr. B, decided to just have a little fit and to block me on all the social media platforms and then just kind of bitch about me. So I was blocked, by the way, and yeah, that was it from my side of things. From the academic side of things, you do have Dr. Sean he was originally over in University of Liverpool. Now he is in Ireland doing various research and so on and so forth. However, he's on the interpretation, and Rachel, you actually have a view on this as well.
thank you.
He has the interpretation, and I kind of disagree. I understand where he's coming from, but I do sort of disagree with it. And then it's Dr. Maria, who is she works for Four Courts Press, who is absolutely amazing for releasing books and documentation and stuff on their
Hmm.
website at the fourcourtspress.ie. And in September, she'll be doing her reply to everything that's going on so far. And
So
then
can you
Dr.
just
Sean.
can you just lay out like the basic debate? You don't need to name names. Like what is
Mm,
explain what is the debate here? What are people disagreeing about? It's a terminology disagreement,
mm.
but it's actually one that I feel matters.
Yeah,
Um,
especially politically for what's going on now, as you
yeah,
pointed out right
yeah,
now. And I think you give a very interesting insight into it, to why people are getting very defensive or manipulating the agenda. And
yeah.
basically, in around, everybody knows this, it should be standard. In 1066, you have the Battle of Hastings, and in the Battle of Hastings, you have people who are defined as Normans
Right,
from Normandy invading into England to capture the English crown.
right,
Quite simple terminology. I don't think anyone could disagree with that one.
right.
And from there, they launch multiple invasions from
They
Normandy into
do.
Sicily. Now, it does get interesting from Sicily because of the fact that these are now Sicilian Normans or Sicilians who were then launching themselves into the Byzantine Empire. You
Right.
also have Normans also going over and getting involved with the Crusades, but they're not. It's not defined like obviously the Crusades isn't defined as a Norman conquest, which is definitely something to take note of what I'm about to talk about next.
Right.
Um, the Crusades, although they're all considered Franks, come from all over
We
the
do.
European world. And that's quite important to what I'm about to say next, because the next place they catapult over to is Ireland in 1169. So the Crusades is 1080. Their adventures over to Sicily is around 1050, and obviously the Battle of Hastings in 1066. The alleged Norman invasion of Ireland happens in 1169. And on top of that, as well, these are people that come from all over the English and French world, the
Right.
world of the Anjou Empire. And that's interesting in itself, because how do you define these people? Because for a long time, we defined them as Normans, and we've seen this as an entire series of Norman invasions or Norman
Right.
events that are happening. But this one, the one that happens in Ireland, it happens 100 years afterwards. And on
Right.
top of that, as well, as some people are pointing out there, oh, well, they were genetically a hybrid of Norse and French. They were the Normans.
Right.
Actually, they're not defined as Normans, especially the first invasion, the one that happens in 1169. Modern academics define them as Cambro Normans, and in the literature itself, they're defined as the Knights of the Welsh Marches. These are Norman knights that move into England. Some of them don't even move into England, they go straight into Normandy once William the Conqueror is looking for tribute from the
Right.
Welsh lords, and they settle into the southern part of Wales and start to marry into the local population. So some of these people don't even have any interaction with the Anglo-Saxon world.
Right.
And on top of that as well, it's complicated because by the time we get into the so-called Norman invasion of Ireland, on top of that as well, it's no longer House Normandy. Everyone assumes House Normandy is in control. In fact, House Normandy was kind of kicked to the side with the likes of Empress Matilda and
Yeah.
Henry II.
Yeah, exactly. By the time it's Henry II, it's not even Norman. He's Angevin. He's from Anjou.
Mm.
He's
So,
so it's not, yeah, it's like, is it even Norman anymore at that point? So then the question comes, so these the knights who led the adventure, as it would have been called in at the time, into Ireland, who were they? Right? Were they Anglo-Saxon? Were they Norman? Were they, because Normandy is not Anjou, right? We all have to understand France is not France in
yeah.
the 12th century. France is the Ile-de-France. It's Paris, basically. That's France. So the Anjou look at themselves as being different people in essence
Mm.
than the people from Normandy.
Mm.
So yeah, so who are these people who are invading? And I
Um,
think, yeah, go on.
Oh no, there was a very good question as well. And I definitely think I should answer this one. Why were the Normans invading? So why were the Normans invading Ireland? Do you mind if I answer this question
Yeah,
before we move
absolutely,
on?
go for it. Yeah, it's a good
So
question. Answer it.
why were the Normans invading in Ireland? Well, around 1150, you actually have what happened is that previously, if we step back, you have the rightful King of Ireland, who is what was it called? Murtoch y Breen. So Murtoch y Breen is seen as the rightful King of Ireland at the time. However, around 1103, he's usurped by the O'Connors. So the O'Connors, they have the rightful claim to the Ré Éireann, the King of Ireland, the Kingship of Ireland, which is also recognised by the papacy.
Mm,
What was
right.
it called? The O'Briens had the Ibrahim. They were seen by the papacy as the rightful kings. They were recognised by Scotland with the also on top of that as well, um, he's trying to modernize Ireland. So on top of that, you go into three generations on, you have Murtagh Breen, who's still pushing for more centralization. He gives Cashel, the Rock of Cashel, which was used to be the old capital of the Ibreen, to the papacy, and then he goes to Dublin and he tries to centralize himself around Dublin. That's insanely modern. But you see, the thing is that Murtagh Breen, just like his grandfather had a modern
Hmm.
education, Murtagh Breen had been educated in Dublin. That's the equivalent of getting a modern a child from a royal family and putting him
Right.
in New York, putting him in Singapore, putting him in Hong Kong, so he can see the wider world, and his
Right.
mind's completely open to it. To see multiculturalism, the most peak of these greatest businessmen of the world at the peak. That's literally what happened to him when he was a child. His father, Turlough Breen, purposely put him into Dublin to give him this modern interpretation. And the reason why I tell you this is just so you have an idea that this is not a backwards Ireland at the time. This is a very modern, sophisticated Ireland that Murtagh Breen is pushing for. And what happened then is that what was it called? Murtagh Breen has a moment of weakness, and he
Hmm.
very quickly gets usurped by the O'Connors. And the
Right.
O'Connors don't pull back Ireland. In fact, the what was it? Turlough O'Connor, he takes over the kingship of Ireland, and he continues to modernize Ireland. The proof of this is in the Cross of Con. The Cross of Con is seen as a very modern Hiberno-Scandinavian piece of art. It's absolutely gorgeous, and in the center of it, as Rachel has joked about this before, is a piece of the True Cross,
Right.
which was a gift from the papacy because of the Irish involvement with the Crusades. Rachel's joked about this like 1,000 times because there's pieces of the True Cross found all over Europe,
The
which I
the
actually didn't know
forest,
about.
the forest of the true cross.
Uh, I thought we were special.
Yeah. No.
I thought I really, when I
You
was
know,
reading this, I actually thought we were special.
yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It's that so Buddhism also has relics. And
Mm,
Buddha also, if you put together like all of the Buddha's teeth that are enshrined in pagodas, and you put together all of the Buddha's hands and all of the
mm,
Buddha's feet that are enshrined in various pagodas, you would end up with like 1,000 Buddhas. Like if you
mm.
reconstruct it, it's the same thing. Like
Yeah.
it's humans will human. It's just what we
Susan,
do.
Susan's reading my mind. She's already 3 steps ahead. You're perfectly right. It was the Enel then that would be the next to rebel against the O'Connors. So the O'Connors weren't really seen as proper, the rightful kings. And this is
Uh,
something that even
they're
the
they're viewed as
papacy,
upstarts, aren't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
because they're usurpers
Mm,
to the O'Briens. And
right.
you see, the Enel, what was it called? The Enel, whose successors is MacLachlan, should be the much more rightful, as Susan has put there, Ardria High Kings. They're an older stock again. They're an even older family. So this is like the return of the Rothschilds or something.
Right.
This is really, really old money looking to reclaim their power and status in Ireland because these other usurpers have taken over. And they're
Mhm.
successors of the MacLachlans. So they start a civil war around 1150 between the MacLachlans and the O'Connors. And the O'Connors end up under a mixture of Turlough O'Connor and Rory O'Connor. Um, Rory O'Connor ends up taking over. And Rory O'Connor ends up beating the MacLachlans and subjugating them to his kingship, right? So he's very much
Uh,
victorious in this. However, there's one lord that was on the side of the MacLachlans who's now in a really, really bad position because he's close to Dublin. He's in a really, really important piece of land. He's on the losing side, and that's
oh.
Diarmid MacMurrough, okay? So Diarmid MacMurrough becomes a very criticised character throughout all of Irish history, especially in a period of nationalism, because what he does next is that he goes over to England and then over to France looking for Henry II because he's desperate for mercenaries. In fact, he's so desperate, he turns around to Henry II and he says, "We can just take over Ireland. I'll recognize you as King of Ireland," right? He becomes that desperate because he's
Oh my God.
terrified that his lands are going to be taken by the O'Connors, especially because the O'Connors have been positioning the O'Rourke's to take over that piece of land that's very close to Dublin. That's really important because the amount of trade going between Dublin to what was it, Clonmacnoise, you know, you can see why the O'Connors are thinking about really just kicking the Macmorras off their land and putting the O'Rourke's in that territory. So Henry II at the time, he's like, well, I'm busy fighting in France. What you can do instead, I'll give you a piece of letter and you can get any mercenary you want. Now, this is where it gets really, really funny because, as we were saying previously, the Anjous had recently taken the crown away from King Stephen in a sort of negotiation stalemate,
Yeah.
right?
I mean,
Yeah,
it was a nasty civil war. It had been going on for
yeah,
decades. There was not really going to be an end to it. But then also Stephen's son dies,
yeah.
so it's an easy choice for him. Like there's no
Mm,
there's another person who could have had a claim, another cousin or something like that, as I
mm,
recall. But Stephen decides this is the only way there's going to
yeah.
actually be peace again in the kingdom. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And so this is where it does get very, very funny. Dermot McMurrough, he decides he's already in a mood of all these great ideas, and he decides this is the best idea he has yet. He decides he's going to go to Wales, where a certain guy called Strongbow, he's a member of the De Clare family, and the De Clare family had recently been given the boot out of England because Henry II was notoriously anti-De Clare because they had sided on the side of King Stephen. And
mm,
so when Dermot McMurrough decides it's a really good idea to go to Wales and hire De Clare, Strongbow, and all the Cambro Normans to come with him to Ireland to not just defend his lands, but he wants to reenact, start up an entire civil war. He ends up getting so many mercenaries because you also have backers and people involved with finances. They're just like, hey, wait, we can take a whole load of land and we can make a lot of money here. So people are pumping money, they're throwing money into this. And what happens is that the invasion just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. What originally was just mercenaries joining in with a second civil war turns into an entire invasion.
right.
So they start to organize themselves. You have an initial invasion in 1169, but it doesn't really build up until 1170. And then Henry II, who, by the way, is looking for an excuse to go into hiding at the time because he's just killed Thomas Becket. He's just like, oh,
Yeah,
wait,
yeah, he did. Well, okay, he didn't kill him
oh, yeah,
himself. He
well, yeah, yeah, yeah.
he just said some things, and that gave some knights a really bad idea about
Mm,
what they should do to make the king happy.
mm, mm, mm.
But yeah,
You know,
Henry is facing some real criticism at
mm.
home, and I think we have to remember people have this
Up from Armagh that hey, this Norman invasion of Ireland, that's okay from the Irish clergy. They've given the thumbs up for Strongbow to become the next king of Ireland, and Henry II can't have any of this because he feels that if Strongbow becomes king of Ireland, he could end up becoming a threat to Henry II. So
right.
while all this invasion is happening, Henry II raises his own military force and he invades into Ireland. Okay, so now that I pretty much updated you guys, now this gets more complicated, obviously, once the invasion happenings, and this tears on until 1160. What was it? 1170. Sorry, 1175, when eventually the
Yeah.
Irish actually do beat the Norman invasion at the Battle of Thurles in around 1175, and then the siege of Limerick, way out in the west of Ireland, turns into a stalemate as well, because it's a mixture of the Normans not having the resources, and also the O'Briens. They constantly, anytime they start to siege over the wall, which Limerick is tough enough. If you have ever seen Limerick, it is an absolute nightmare to siege. However, every single time the Normans just get over the walls, the O'Briens are just like, oh, we have more lands behind us. We'll just burn this settlement and just run off into the background. And then when you guys run out of resources, we'll go and take Limerick Castle again. So they just keep doing that over and over again. So Limerick Castle turns into a stalemate, which causes them then to go into the Treaty of Windsor around
Right.
1175, 1176. But I basically told you the information you need. How do you define those invasions? And
Okay,
for a
just
long
pause,
time,
pause
yeah,
there because we might be having Susan. I'm not having any. Okay, I'm not having. Susan says, "Are we having gremlin problems?" I don't think so. But
yeah.
are there issues with the stream, guys? You have to let us know.
Mm,
Is the visual quality bad? Is the sound bad? Are there breaks? Is it dropping? Is it coming back? Because from my
mm,
end, it's all good, but
yeah.
I don't see the stream, right? I only see the camera. So
Mm,
if you guys if you all if our dear audience are observing issues in the stream quality, let us know, although there's not necessarily much we can do about it, unfortunately.
the
Yeah.
joys.
Yeah, the joys. Yep. We're good now. Okay. Well, that would explain why the viewership is relatively low, because when the stream quality is low, it doesn't get pushed on YouTube. So that's interesting.
Yeah, maybe
Ugh,
I should just fix one or two things on my side, actually, just to make sure your side can improve a wee bit. But
yeah, maybe. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so the question was, who is Thomas a Becket? So Twitchy answered he was the Archbishop of Canterbury, but he's a complicated figure. The story of Thomas a Becket is a very interesting one because he's not exactly a rags to riches story, but he's a
mm,
commoner to power story.
yeah,
And he's the son of a merchant, right? And he ends up getting buddy buddy with Henry II, and they're like best buds. And
mm,
Henry II thinks, well, you should go into the church and I'll promote you, and then you can be my like my right hand man on the church side of this whole England thing.
mm.
And then Thomas a Becket finds Jesus.
He
He
did, didn't
actually he finds Jesus, right? He goes from being this party boy, this frat party boy, basically, like literally Henry II's drinking buddy,
he? Mm,
to finding Jesus and getting really sanctimonious. And not even necessarily in a bad way. I mean, honestly, I think Thomas a Becket had a lot of good things to say. Unfortunately, um, he became a thorn in Henry's side,
yeah,
and and that's where eventually Henry was mercurial. Henry
mm,
II was he was a lion. He was a passionate man, and those passions were positive and negative. And so, in a fit of rage, he rages out, and he supposedly, I don't know if this has actually been tracked down really to him, but at least apocryphally, he's credited with saying, "Will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest?" in 12th century French.
mm.
And his knights hear that and decide, okay, what better way to get the king's favor than to take care of this thorn in his side in such a way that he doesn't actually have to kill him?
Mm.
Well, the death of Thomas a Becket was gruesome. Like, it is, if you read the chronicle that describes it, it's it's the worse than any slasher movie that Hollywood has produced. It was really gruesome. So
Mm.
then Henry II he has to face like serious penance, and he performs a serious penance where I don't remember how far it is, he crawls on his knees,
Yeah,
wearing a hair shirt to basically shrive himself of this murder of the Archbishop of Canterbury,
yeah.
the most powerful cleric in England in the time.
But it's crazy because up to that point it was Saint. I think it's either Edmund or Edward. Which one was it? Edwin. England. The one that's in East
Oh,
Anglia, he was
Edward the
killed.
Confessor? You
Yeah,
mean the
Edward the
king?
Confessor.
Edward the
Was it?
Confessor, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the one from East Anglia that was killed by Ivor the Boneless around 850. He was tied to a tree and a whole load of arrows were shot into him. He was kind of the first major saint of, and probably Bede before that. But
Oh no,
he
not Edward the Confessor. Then I wasn't certain where you were going. No,
yeah,
Edward the Confessor was an 11th century English king. So
yeah,
no,
yeah, that's the
not
one.
Edward the Confessor.
But he, what was it called? I apologize for this one. My brain is going in and out of it. But regardless, he was the first major saint of England, and then it was Thomas Becket. And Thomas Becket becomes such a thorn in the side of the Plantagenets that, and it, by the way, like even when Henry II, he does his own forgiveness ceremony and he tries, and he basically allows the church to do whatever they wanted with him. So they would, him and the people would forgive him. And it, like Thomas Becket continues to become a symbol and a thorn in the side of the Plantagenets, even going into the Hundred Years' War, that Edward III has to go on an entire propaganda spree going into the Hundred Years' War, promoting St. George as the patron. I am now the main character. No
Yeah,
audio, no visual, not frozen here. Oh, it could be other people's internet connection, perhaps. I don't know.
yeah. Well, it could be or not. I can usually tell when we actually have a good quality, when we have a good internet connection, because our views skyrocket, and they haven't been. So it could actually be, it could be something on my end. Who knows?
Mm. Nice headphones. Yeah, I just kind of picked them off the floor. I'm over in Okinawa, so I'm not really picking. I went off when I first came to Okinawa. I bought loads of expensive kit, and it was really really great. Like I bought the likes of the Blue Yeti and all that stuff because I was planning on doing a lot of stuff anyway with social media to promote my tourism side of things because I had with coronavirus and stuff. I put my tourism on pause and I was planning on focusing on the social media side. But because I live in Okinawa, all of that really expensive kit started to fall apart so quickly. So now I just like go Cold War. I constantly look around to see, okay, what's constructed or what's thinking like the Cold War. Because you know, like anything that was major on the Cold War, you can get it, or even in the 80s, you can get it and just smash it off the floor multiple times and it will work
Yeah,
perfectly. But
yeah. You
these
could dump
headphones,
sand in it, pour water on it. It doesn't
uh,
matter. It would work. Yeah.
yeah. So
Oh,
I'm just 100% Cold War. If it can work during the Cold War, it is, and it's still working today. It is gold to me. These modern stuff that's like super
oh,
expensive, absolutely amazing. They're just trash when it
it's
comes down to
trash.
Okinawa. They're great. Don't get me wrong. They're really really good in Ireland because Ireland is really cold. So they like it's easy to look after all that stuff. But here in Okinawa, no way. It's so difficult to look after anything here because it just
It's
falls apart
humid.
so
It's
quickly.
very
Yeah.
humid. Yeah,
Oh, it's
it's very
wild.
humid.
Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, I love
Anyway,
it. Like, but go on.
the whole point of the topic was that we were talking about. So the big debate, as far as I can tell, is whether this force, this
Mm,
the series of men at arms
mm,
from from not Ireland, we'll just define it that way, from not Ireland, that
Yeah.
comes in the 1170s and the 1180s, right? Are they Norman in quotes? Are
Mm.
they English? Are they Welsh? Right? So there seems to be, from my perspective, there seems to be a debate about the labels we should use for that force. And
Mm.
there's one group of historians and politicians, unfortunately, who want to call them the English, right?
Yeah.
The English invade in the 1170s, and thus begins 800 years of brutal oppression, right? Like
Mm.
that's one narrative that gets told.
Yeah, and that's mostly being pushed by Doctor Sean. And don't get me wrong, Sean is an absolutely brilliant historian. Like he really, 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 really knows his stuff. So if you think Sean just doesn't know what he's talking about, please, please, please read his book. His book, you will learn something. He is really, 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 really switched on. Everyone in Sinn Féin because this is a large political party, just like everyone in Sinn Féin because this is a large political party, just like the Republican Party in America, where you've got dozens of people with dozens of different opinions and interpretations. That's the same thing with Sinn Féin, where there's many members in there, different opinions, different agendas. So when Rachel does say that maybe there's a political agenda in there, I have to. There's a good chance that there is. You never know.
And I mean, I don't even necessarily mean that I don't mean at the level of a conspiracy theory.
Yeah,
I mean that, and I'm talking about political, going back to the 19th century
yeah.
nationalist movement, right?
Mm,
Like there's a, and let me tell you, the English set themselves up for it because they were assholes in the last couple of hundred years,
yeah,
right? Like horrible, disgusting, cruel people to
yeah,
the Irish at a systemic level. I'm
yeah,
not talking about on a one-to-one level. I mean the British government, the way it treated Ireland specifically in the from the 17th to the 19th century is, oh my God, horrible.
yeah.
So
100%.
they set themselves up to be turned into this 800-year-old villain, but the real question is, but is that narrative true, right?
Mm,
And that narrative seems more true when you say things like the English invaded in 1170 whatever.
yeah.
But that brings us to the question of, was it the English who invaded? Who
Mm,
was actually leading this movement? Who were the cogs of power? Who
mm,
were the financiers of this movement? Who were the ones who were actually wielding the swords?
mm,
Right?
mm.
Like those are the questions. And so the debate seems to be, do we call them Norman? Do we call them English? Do we call them Cambro Norman? Are they Welsh? As you said,
Yeah.
there's chronicles from the time that call them Welsh knights, right?
Mm, mm, mm.
So,
Yeah,
you
you
know,
had the what was it called? The oh my god, the Knights of the Welsh Marshes is literally how they're defined in 1169. So it's not even like I just put up Sean's name here. You can see why I'm not going to pronounce it, especially when Sean likes his name being pronounced properly and rightfully so. But I'll post up his correct full spelling there for you guys, and I'll jump over to Rachel's page as well, and I'll post his correct pronunciation, well, his correct name, into the chat.
I was
It's a
going to
big
say, because that
long,
what you just wrote is not pronounceable to most people. Just
yeah,
putting that out there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And Sean does not just as a big red light. Sean does not like mispronunciations and stuff, so I'm not going to butcher his name on stream when he doesn't want me to. So we'll just be referring to him as Dr. Sean.
Yep.
Um, it goes to
Yep.
show even an Irish person doesn't have proper Irish. My Irish is absolutely diabolical.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough language to not the language itself, the orthography.
Mm,
Like actually, Irish orthography is a lot like English orthography in the sense of it's not terribly phonetic,
yeah.
right? It needs to be English needs an update. Maybe Irish needs an update too on how words are spelled, but that's probably
Mm,
never going to happen. So
mm.
okay, so there's been some more comments about screen freezing and sound issues. So if you guys could let us know if that is true, is everyone having sound and screen issues, or is it just some people? And Ursula Bear came back from Facebook where the things had frozen. Just so you all know, Facebook and TikTok don't really earn us any money for these live streams. So if you want to actually support our channels, watching from YouTube actually does that. Whereas
Mm.
Facebook gives me not a single cent for live streams. I just stream there
Yeah.
for extra coverage.
Yeah, it gives us the opportunity for them to
Right,
take our money.
right, right. Yeah.
What was it called? Yeah, the definition of the, as it was called before, the Norman invasion of Ireland. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't, like, ultimately, from my interpretation, if I lived in the perfect world, I would define the first invasion as the Knights of the Welsh Marshes invasion, because that's what it was. It was organised by Diarmaid MacMora and Strongbow, and originally was going to be a MacMora civil war, but then it turned into a complete invasion, especially when Strongbow was. What happened is that Diarmaid MacMora's son, who was kept as a hostage by the O'Connors to keep his loyalty, his son got decapitated because
Mm,
of the fact that, oh, shock and awe, Diarmaid was planning a rebellion against the O'Connors. So the O'Connors were like, well, you broke our treaty, boop, off with your head. And
I
that was the end
mean,
of his dynasty.
that is that is kind of how it goes. I mean, that's the whole
Yeah,
point of a hostage, or excuse me, a guest. A
yeah,
guest.
mm,
That's the whole point of that system was to ensure good behavior. So if
yeah.
you don't behave in the way that is expected, you should expect that there will be consequences. So that was just a dumbass move.
He's a sociopath. Dr. Sean actually made the argument on a podcast that Diarmaid MacMora shows literally all the traits of a self-centered psychopath. Because even before then, there's
Mm,
multiple SA cases against him. The reason why the O'Rourke's were literally gunning to take his land was because he actually kidnapped the wife of O'Rourke and SA'd her.
uh,
He also kidnapped the abbess of Kildare and also essayed her as well for undermining his manhood. He's a notorious essayer to women who just undermine him. And on top of that, like he's just so self-centered in the moment. He literally ticks all the boxes of why a self-centered sociopath should not be a leader. Don't get me wrong, very he's exceptionally charming, gets on people's good sides,
they
always
usually are,
managed.
though,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like people like that usually are, and that's how they become leaders.
yeah,
That's that's why, and that's why people also don't generally remove them from power
yeah,
because of that charming, charismatic side.
yeah.
So yeah, I could
Because
see that. That makes sense.
he kidnapped what was it called, Lawrence O'Toole, as a child, was sent to the MacMora family as a guest, kind of what was it, a fostered child, right?
Hmm.
And what was it called, the MacMoras, mostly Diarmaid MacMora, put him into a makeshift dungeon and tortured him, just for shits and giggles. That was Lawrence O'Toole, who ends up becoming a very famous saint in
Oh,
Ireland.
right, right.
And during their negotiations, McMora, what's called, charms Lawrence O'Toole to get on his good side again. Like, he's a notorious, like, he does wrong, wrong, wrong. He even has multiple meetings, even afterwards, with O'Connor, Rory O'Connor, and managed to charm his way out of it. Like, he literally ticks all the boxes of a self-centered sociopath. Like, if you want the definition, the textbook definition, just like Hannibal Lecter.
Right.
Also, on top of that, Dermot McMurrough, he literally ticks every single box of what it is to be a self-centered sociopath. And you see, this is the major problem. And it's something we'll definitely discuss during the Italian Wars and how the Italian Wars affects us today. Like, how do you keep people who are self-centered sociopaths on a leash? Because you even, as Rachel points out, that just a few seconds ago, you straight up have that today. Like, anyone here could easily imagine anyone in the political side of things who's a self-centered sociopath right now who gets voted into power. The problem is with these people is that you give them something and they'll think about just the here and now and themselves, and will literally break what was it, the following day will literally break the agreement that you have with them.
Yeah.
So what you have throughout the medieval period is constant counters to put these people back into place again. They're very destructive to society.
Yep. No, 100%. So, so basically, this question just sounds like the orange turnip O'Connor does.
Mm.
Yeah, maybe. If the orange turnip weren't turnip shaped.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's Dermot McMurrough, who's the self-centered sociopath. And Dr.
Right.
Sean on the Irish Medieval podcast made that argument, and he made an absolutely brilliant argument about it. Because for a very long time, I'd always looked at Dermot McMurrough and went, well, he was doing it for the good of his family. And then Sean is like, he's committed multiple essays.
Right.
And on top of that as well, when he goes to England, the moment he goes over to England, this gets back to the O'Connors, and they're just like, well, he's just broke. We know what he's up to. He's not
Right.
going to England to go and pick flowers with his friend in England or something. He's going over there to raise a rebellion against me. I'm killing his sons.
Right.
I don't think O'Connor kills his sons straight away, but from that point onwards, from the story perspective, you can count them as dead. They eventually do get decapitated, and the thing is that from that point onwards, Dimberg MacMorra's his main dynasty that's died off, and he puts the Declares in line to take over his family. He has his daughter, Aoife MacMorra, marry Strongbow, and there's this really super famous painting in Ireland of Aoife and Strongbow being married. It's from the interpretation of the 19th century, but it
Oh
is
yeah.
absolutely gorgeous. It is
Yeah. Of
so
course.
beautiful. Mm.
Those big romantic paintings that give everyone the wrong idea about clothing, armor, hair,
Yeah.
colors, cleanliness,
Once,
spaces. Yeah, guys, if you ever look at those 19th century paintings of history, consider them to be fantasy paintings and
yeah.
appreciate their beauty, but don't use it to actually inform your imagining of the past, because they couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, because he's in pure 15th century armor, like proper. He's dressed exactly like the
he's
Black
got
Prince
he's
in
in
that painting.
harness, is he?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Oh, he's in the full shebang. Like, they must have thought that the 15th century was just how the English always dressed. It's like they looked at
Yeah.
the effigy of the Black Prince and was like, okay, that's how all English people dress.
Yeah. And for the entire 1,000 years of the Middle Ages, of course.
Mm.
My
Oh, chalk
camera
it
is
on.
dusty. I don't think so, but I'll give it a swipe anyway. It shouldn't be any. I mean, nothing. Maybe when I reset it, my greasy finger may have left a print. So that's a possibility. Well, I've cleaned it now, so that's as clean as it gets, guys.
In fairness, the HD suddenly kicked in.
Oh my god. Yeah, right. Oh my god.
Mm,
Probably from when I reset, because you have to, like, pull down from above. So probably I
mm, mm,
smudged
mm.
it with my greasy human fingers, right? So yeah, so that you've had some excitement on your side, and you were so at the beginning we were talking about how it's the archaeology season, right?
Mm,
And so now we've got all these archaeological digs are kind of back on, and so
mm.
new things are being found. Did you hear about the toilet notebook?
No, actually, I
The
haven't heard
the
of that
toilet
one.
the medieval iPhone that was found in a toilet, basically.
Medieval iPhone?
Yeah,
No.
so the
You
equivalent,
mean
the analog equivalent of the iPhone, basically.
okay.
So what some people don't know, I've been making some posts and videos about this. So some people have heard this story, but not everyone has,
Mm,
and
mm, mm.
apparently you haven't.
No.
So the medieval method of keeping track of notes, of making notes as you go along throughout your day, is what we would now call a wax tablet. They
Mm.
actually carried on Ruhr Valley part of Germany, the part that got leveled really heavily during World War II.
Mm.
They were recently building a new building, and this is probably true in Ireland. Whenever they build new buildings in Germany, they have to do an archaeological excavation, right? They
Mm.
have to they have to do a survey. Is that true in Ireland? When you build a new building, you have to have an
Sorry.
archaeologist come in.
Sorry guys, is that completely throw us back again? I wonder what's causing that to turn on
I
and
don't know.
off.
I am hardwired in. Like I am attached. I am not on Wi-Fi. I am on
Mm.
Ethernet. So hold on a minute. Let me.
Because it is literally, it's not the internet on our side because that's flying on Restream right now. Like I'm communicating with Rachel perfectly fine. Normally, what happens when that's freezing and unfreezing, there's disconnection from the Restream side of things. This
Yeah.
is definitely a problem with YouTube, from from what I can say. I don't think that's a problem from our side. I do think this is a YouTube problem. Because if it was our problem or a restream problem, the it would freeze and act up and everything like it usually does. It's not. So I see this as being more of a YouTube problem. So
Yeah.
yeah, YouTube fault rather than a restream, or we'll get in contact with restream and we'll ask them what the story is and stuff, because this is quite annoying for it to start, stop and start up again.
Yeah. That's especially because, like I said, I'm hired. I am hardwired in. There is no Wi-Fi. I'm attached by the old school Ethernet cable
Yeah.
directly to the modem.
Mm.
So, and yeah, like you said, I can see you and hear you just fine.
Yeah.
So our connection is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The,
I'm
the,
wondering. I'm
yeah.
wondering if it's a YouTube issue. Well, that's
Yeah.
frustrating. Okay, what was the last thing everyone heard? Did everyone hear about the excavations that need to be done when you build new buildings? And actually, that's a good question. Was it frozen for everyone, or just because this is the really weird part, Philip? I feel like some people are getting disruption and some people aren't,
Mm.
and because just from the based on the comments, some people said it's frozen, and other people say it's not frozen for me. So I don't understand.
Yeah, there were new laws put in place that's censoring what people are seeing and not seeing. So you could have said A, B, and C, and YouTube is like, "Oh, we have to censor that," and the EU or whatever. It depends where people are. Where is everybody right now? Is everybody in Europe or America
A
right
lot
now,
of
or
lot of
what's the
people are
crack?
in. I know a lot of people are in the U.S. and Twitchy
Yeah,
is in the U.K.
yeah,
Um, anyway, so they were doing this excavation in Paderborn,
yeah.
and because they were building a building, and they found a latrine, a medieval latrine.
Yeah.
Now, Yuki should love latrines. Latrines should be
She
one of her. I
does.
know she focuses on bones, but even
Mm.
still, latrines should be one of her favorite things to dig through as an
Oh, I.
archaeologist, because latrines are where they find all of the best stuff.
Mm.
Because what is the old adage? One man's trash is another man's treasure.
Yeah,
Well,
that's it.
in in the Middle Ages, the things they thought were trash often ended up in the latrine,
Mm.
disposed of, just tossed into the latrine. And so we can find things like scraps of fabric, broken bits of ceramic, broken pieces of furniture in some cases. But in this latrine, which by the way dates to the 13th to the 14th century,
Mm.
it still smells apparently like a latrine. It got sealed up long enough ago
Mm.
and was still moist. And so when they were digging through this latrine, it smelled like a latrine.
Lovely.
And they found this clump of muddy poo.
Mm.
And in the clump of muddy poo, it turned out there was a perfectly preserved wax tablet in its perfectly preserved case.
Mm.
That my interpretation of what happened, I think this dude, my dude, who turns out was probably a wealthy merchant because he wrote in Latin. I
Ah,
think my
well.
dude was sitting in the latrine, the public latrine,
Mm.
and I think he did what oh so many of us had done. He dropped it in the latrine.
Mm. I
I
can
think he
imagine
was using
easily.
it. I
Yeah.
think he either was taking it out to make notes while he did his business, or he had just finished making notes and was putting it back in his case and went to put it back on his belt when he dropped it as he was standing up and it fell into the latrine. But guess what my dude decided not to do?
Not go swimming in there.
He did not go swimming in there. He did
No,
not go
not at
swimming in there.
all.
Mm-mm. Because now we have these nice flushing toilets, right? So, okay, yeah, there might be some of you in the toilet, maybe, but at least it's just you and there's water. So, medieval latrines, no, no,
Yeah.
that would have been a disgusting slurry. Um,
Easily imagine, all right. Like,
and
even
so,
when you said that they still kept the smell, like it was extra. Like the smell is so bad that it was
oh,
perfectly preserved. How many? When's this dated to?
so they think 13th. They're thinking 13th century
Oh God.
increasingly. The
Mm.
uh, the latrine itself seems to be 13th, 14th century is kind of its
Mm.
period of use because of the other items that have been found in it. And the archaeologist who was given, or the conservator, so the object specialist, who has received this beautiful, beautiful wax tablet for restoration.
Mm.
She was interviewed by the state of oh god Rhineland Westphalen, I think it was, or I forget which of the German states it was, but this was an official press release from the state. I read the original German press release, and
Mm.
she's quoted in this official state press release as saying basically, it still smells of the latrine.
Mm. It's
and
absolutely brilliant.
and her unfortunate task has been to peel back the layers of
Mm.
the latrine, which need
Roger.
to. You
Mm.
need to. They're super fun. I have
Oh.
several for living history events. So I actually use
Yeah.
them to make notes throughout my day, and I keep, like, if I'm organizing a ball, I'll write down the order of dances in my wax tablet so that at
Mm.
the ball, I'm looking at my wax tablet to check things out and keep track. But here's the thing about wax. It's actually a little tricky to write in. It has to be the right consistency, and modern reproductions aren't always the right consistency of ratio of oil to wax to make the wax filling. But even when it's the right ratio and it's nice and pliable, when
Yeah.
you do you how do you think you could erase the tablet? Like you want to erase the writing. What do you think you do to erase writing on a tablet?
Just like you melt it, maybe.
Oh, nothing so sophisticated. So a stylus has two ends. It has a
Okay.
pointy end and then it has a spatula end, like a
Mm,
fanned out flat end. And you just take the spatula end and you just smooth the wax.
mm,
You just smooth it out. But here's the thing. No one, and I mean no one, takes the time to really fill in all the wax. Because
mm, mm.
that's real effort. You'd have to like really dig into it. So basically most people, yours truly included, they just take the spatula end and they just smooth it over just enough to write a new layer of writing.
Mm, mm, mm,
So over time, each layer of writing just gets pressed down into the wax and it's preserved. So they can actually take modern imaging devices like a CAT scan,
mm.
like an MRI, and they
Yeah.
can actually scan the whole thing and they can peel back each layer of writing
Mm,
to
mm, mm.
see what this man put in his notebook,
Oh my God, that's so awesome.
right? We're going to be able to read this man's maybe secrets,
Mm,
maybe.
mm. Hopefully, that'd
So,
be class.
so yeah. So they say it should take about a year to conserve this tablet and its case
Mm.
because they can't. They have to find a way to keep it moist that doesn't involve it just sitting in a
Ah,
glass of distilled water. Right now, it's in a jar of distilled water. That's
okay.
that they change every day. Basically, it's so they've got to do some treatments to rehydrate it in a more permanent way, so that it can be stabilized, and then they will subject it to this to imaging. So stay tuned for salacious stories from the Potterborn toilet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That freezing, I was just checking it out there. That does seem to be a location problem, and also on top of that, that's not affecting both channels at the same time. I don't know what's happening on YouTube, but it
Yeah,
seems reading the comments and stuff, certain locations are being affected. And then on top of that, it's also like when it's freezing on Rachel's side, my side is working perfectly fine. And then when my side is acting frozen allegedly, then Rachel's side is working perfectly fine. So it is 100% a YouTube problem. I don't know what
great.
YouTube is doing, to be honest with you. I don't know what crack they're on. Um, we're trying to get in contact and see what the crack is with YouTube, why their system is acting up so much today. It's on Patreon. It's on Patreon.
Yeah, yeah,
Patreon,
yeah. Oh,
yeah, no.
ads play. Yeah, so the ads play. As Haas
Yes, of
Priest says,
course
the
they do.
ads play.
Yeah, YouTube making sure it gets paid.
So that is actually a valid point. Are the ads freezing?
Mm, yeah,
God, yeah, and it could be that that YouTube is detecting the basically the OBS system, the restream in this case. Then they don't like that
yeah, it could be that as
because
well.
they don't want us streaming to multiple platforms at once. That could be an issue as well. That
Mm.
YouTube is purposely punishing us. I have no sound. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Does
I see
everyone?
some people complaining about that as well.
Does
Yeah, it's
everyone?
just
But meanwhile, Lukey. So Lukey, have you or Lucky, Lukey Walsh. Where was his comment? Lukey. Yeah, it does say Lukey. Lukey, has it been fine the whole time? That'll be the interesting question. And then
Yeah, and I
Cash
think
Baby says back,
yeah, I think someone from yeah, Lukey from California says it's been perfectly fine for him the whole time. Kevin Murphy's also said it's been perfectly fine for him the whole time. Some people are just being affected and others aren't. That's why I think it's like, because if it was a YouTube problem, YouTube would just give us a big slap on the nose. They wouldn't just break it up the way it has been broke up. When it breaks up like that, it's mostly a hacker problem. People are hacking it in various points. When YouTube gives us a slap, they give us a serious whack, and they even knock us out of it. Like, they literally just turn off our stream if they weren't
"Here's
happy
Lucy."
about it.
Yeah, no problems here since I got on. Okay, well then, that is interesting, isn't it? Okay, so I think at that level it must be it's yeah. Well, we'll press onward anyway. We'll press onward anyway.
At least we
Uh,
can entertain Walsh anyway.
yeah, we can entertain Luki. That's great.
Yeah.
Are we both in Japan? No.
I'm in Japan.
Yeah, yeah. Philip is in Japan, and I am currently in Daegu, South Korea.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, Twitchy's on a VPN. Let me swatch
Oh,
vacation. Yeah. Are anyone is anyone else on a VPN? Yeah. So VPNs are great, but they can also cause reception issues for a variety of reasons.
mm.
Um, yeah. Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
currently in Daegu, South Korea. It's a beautiful rainy day. Well, humid rainy day. I love days like this. These summer rainy days where it's a little warm and humid. My hair loves the humidity. My skin loves the humidity, so it makes me super happy. Yeah, in
Mm.
fact, I just finished. The reason we're starting at 10:30 this morning is because I had a traditional Korean tea ceremony rehearsal this morning. So
Oh,
I've
really?
been I've been learning how to serve tea the Korean way, which is beautiful and elegant, but nowhere near as ridiculously fussy as the Japanese way.
Okay, I can imagine. All right.
The Japanese, God bless them, they they have turned everything into an overly complicated series of steps and ceremonies just for the sake of complicated ceremony.
On purpose. This is what's really interesting. I think it's around three. I could be wrong on this one. You guys can correct me in the comment section, but I think it's around 300 BC, maybe somewhere around 300 BC, 300 AD. That they start a clique society. So as new technology is coming in from both China and Korea into the, what was it called? The, oh, where is it? Just close to Nagoya, somewhere around there. I can't remember the bloody name of their capital at the time, but as the information is coming
Mm,
into Japan, they start to have a very clique society. So basically, anybody who has the information becomes the dominant clan or the dominant society. So what they decide to do is have this kind of, well, you're either in or you're out. If you're out, you're an enemy to the clan. If you're in, then you have to do exactly as we say. So from
right.
there, it starts a very kind of clique society. And then something really, really interesting happens. Just as Shintoism is starting to pop off in Japan, there is a plague that kicks off, and they suddenly become really hygiene crazy,
Mm,
because magically
uh,
washing hands, and you'll notice that anytime you go to a Shinto shrine,
yep,
there's an area to wash your hands.
there
That
is.
goes back to the very early dynasties that are very cliquish. And by magic, they noticed that this whole ceremony of washing your hand works. So then they add a ceremony to everything. Like, they can't explain why ceremonies work, but then they go really ritual crazy. So a combination of having a clique society where if you don't have the technology, you're an enemy to the clan, and you want to have the technology because if you don't, you're going to be behind. And on top of that, with the introduction of Shintoism and ritualism, because of the washing your hands, which they cannot explain, you start to have a very kind of uniform society, which is so interesting. Like,
There's a comment from Husafel that I didn't have any bling, and that made me realize I didn't have any bling. So I'm just going to go ahead and bling up as we talk about the complications of Japanese society
mm,
and the way the Japanese do things. Yeah, it is very interesting. And if you think about it, probably in the origins of of most of the Japanese rituals, there was a
Mm.
practical level to it.
Yeah.
And there was a level of, okay, we're going to have a standardized set of procedures. That's going to
Mm.
mean that it's going to go the same every time. The thing produced will be the same every time.
Yeah.
And so at that level, it makes sense. But there's practical levels of ceremony, and then there's taking it to the absurd extreme. And Korea is about practical level of ceremony, and Japan is like, oh, hold my beer, or excuse me, hold my sake. we're going to
Mm.
go we're going to go take this to the next level of extreme we can possibly take it.
Yeah. Did Ireland have, maybe Rachel can expand on this one some more, did Ireland have herbal teas before the tea trade? Not that I know of. Ireland does have herbalists, and it's got what Europe would refer to as witches, which is the white women. So first and foremost, you do have the classic clergy in the monastic settlements that do herbalism, but you also have white women as well in the countryside, which, Slavic areas and German areas and stuff would refer to as witches, but they're not this, they don't have the same views as they would do in the
Right.
17th century or just throughout history in Ireland. They would just be referred to as the what's it called, the white women. I can't remember what the bloody Irish linguistic side of it is, but they're referred to in English as the white women. And there's never an understanding in the countryside of a witch culture. You know how like there's a witch culture that starts to appear in Germany and in various other places in Europe going into the late medieval and Renaissance, and then into the early modern period where it just goes absolutely wild. That never really develops in the countryside of Ireland. It does develop, strangely enough, very quickly in the 14th century in Kilkenny, where there's an idea that there's a merchant woman called Ellis Kettler that was a witch, but she was a merchant. She was not a herbalist. Um,
Yeah.
and that was politically motivated, in my opinion. I would say that was politically motivated to
Yeah,
get
I
rid
mean,
of her.
that was yeah, for certain. I mean, but
Mm,
the question about were there herbal teas? So what do you mean by tea? So first off,
yeah,
herbal tea is actually technically an oxymoron,
yeah.
because it's either an herbal tisane or it's tea. Tea is actually the tea plant, Camellia sinensis, but in modern common usage, people have in English have gotten that mixed up. So I have not in anywhere, as far as I can tell, in medieval Europe, do I have evidence of people drinking recreationally
Mm,
hot beverages made from steeped plant parts.
yeah.
I haven't seen evidence of that. We have evidence that water, for pleasure, but that's not the same as an herbal. Like, I don't know, does that count as an herbal tea in your mind? Yeah,
Mm,
I don't know, but that's the only place where I've ever seen that documented. I've never seen references to it anywhere else in medieval Europe. So,
mm.
but that doesn't mean it wasn't. It's just that I haven't found the evidence myself yet.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. My one is still flying away if you guys want to jump over, because I see even on my one that Rachel's YouTube has frozen on my one as well. So I don't know what the hell is going on with YouTube, and that's still stuck. What you guys could do is have my one playing as well, which is great for my views. But it's horrible for Rachel because it's really messing up your because you're on
Yeah, it's,
17 and it would be great. Like the thing is, the reason why you're not blowing off is because
yeah,
this thing bloody keeps freezing.
yeah. I don't know what's
While
going
you
on.
guys wait for Rachel's one to go back up again, I'll just answer a few of the Irish ones because you guys have actually a few good Irish questions there. Where was it again? It's amazing that you're talking about the Normans in Ireland. Were there any historical marriages between both cultures that created a distinct Irish culture that carries on today? Yes, there is, but this one caused a lot of arguments as well. Very, very, very early on, actually, when the Anglo Normans come in, that was Henry II's invasion in 1171. The Burghs, who were actually sieging, they end up taking over the siege of Limerick because even after the treaties go on and confirm it, the Burghs, under the English crown, with the thumbs up of the English crown, go back and siege Limerick again against the O'Briens. And they end up having a marriage alliance to basically end the fighting between the two of them, between the Burghs and the O'Briens. You also have Hugh de Lacy. Hugh de Lacy is an interesting
Mm,
character because he
he
goes
is.
somewhat semi-independent against King John, and King John even has to invade Ireland to go and beat up the de Lacys. But he marries the O'Connors, which were the what was it called, the Kings of Ireland at the time, against the wishes of what was it, Henry II and King John. Okay, so the Lacys are funny, funny, funny people. You also have various other marriage alliances as well. Most of them from a very small level, where you have local knights, local Norman knights, marrying local women and stuff, and settling down and stuff. So that all happens from the get go. There don't get me wrong, like some of you guys will say, well, maybe, there's some people who are just like, oh, we're ethnically better and stuff. You do have Normans that do come in and refuse to socialize with local Irish people. And
Mm,
that's seen in Kilkenny, which is funny because you see the most mixing happening as well, especially under the Marshals. The Marshals want solid mixing to be happening between the Normans that come in and the locals. And that's seen because the Marshals put a lot of money into the old Gaelic monastic settlements in that area, and
mm,
then try to force the Middle English peasants that they bring over to go to their churches. So the Marshals are really putting their foot down, but at the same time, there is Norman lords, or Anjou lords, or however you want to put them, old French lords, that refuse. They refuse to go, and they end up building their own church called St. Mary's. And this happens throughout the areas of southeast of Ireland, in particular, where they're building churches called St. Mary's Church. So in Ireland, anywhere where you have a Gaelic, a Gaelic saint, that's a Gaelic area, and anywhere where you have St. Mary's,
hold
that's
on.
a Old French only area. Mm.
Sorry. Ryan was just trying to call me in the middle of the live stream because he's apparently not tracking things right now. So, yeah. Sorry
Ah,
about that, everyone. Hopefully, we're back. Not that I was probably ever back. We might, we might. I do not understand why it is that my channel is the one that's freezing and other people's aren't.
yeah, you always seems
Concepts
to be
of,
back on this side, all right. You're flying again on your channel, and you're flying on my channel as well. So yeah, I think it's back on both of them, and your numbers are slowly going back up, so that's good as well.
yeah. Well, just in case, and if any of you've enjoyed this roller coaster of a live stream, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Poor Rachel.
Oh my God. Ugh. I tell you, I do not understand why it must be this challenging.
Mm.
Ryan is doing better. Oh, for those of you who are concerned, Ryan, yeah, I plied him yesterday with all kinds of tisanes, but really powerful concoctions involving lots of ground cloves. So that really helped with the throat's pain and brought him back from the brink. So he's out and about today. So hopefully he'll get slowly better. But when he gets an infection, when he catches some kind of cold or man cold, his body burns through it in 24 hours and then he's good again.
Uh,
So
that's good. Like, that's a
yeah,
good reaction.
yeah, yeah.
Good old hardy man just gets
Uh,
overwhelmed and then gets back up again.
yeah, yeah, basically, yep. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So gosh, I wonder what the last thing was that people actually heard me say.
That's I just quickly answer Walsh's think that one. That would be Lionel of Antwerp in around 13. So by then, what happened is that the Normans were mixing with the Irish 100 years afterwards. So their children's would have started mixing in with the Irish and stuff. And then in 1366, Lionel of Antwerp, very English member, he's actually a member of the royal family. I think he's like the second son or something of Edward III. And he comes to Ireland around 1366. And he first goes to Carrickfergus, where he loses Carrickfergus Castle to the O'Neills. And he's very much losing left, right, and centre. And some of these people who are attacking him the old French settlers, that had settled in Ireland
Mm.
200 years prior, and now are all settled in Ireland, mixed fully with the Irish and stuff, and are attacking these English settlers is from his perspective. And so some of these old French families are still very somewhat loyal to the crown, such as the Fitzgeralds, the Butlers, the Bergs. He does not want them mixing with the local population. I think
Mhm.
your interpretation of it was really, really interesting, Rachel, that you believe it's because you don't want, sorry, not you in particular, Lionel of Antwerp didn't want the locals, sorry, the English settlers in Ireland to be mixing with these barbarous local Irish because they could be, mixed up. I think that was a very interesting interpretation from you.
Yeah, if you look at the statutes of Kilkenny and specifically the passages that govern appearance, right?
Mm,
Because obviously it covers more than just clothing. But the passages that govern appearance are not like the statutes that come later, like 2 centuries later. In the statutes of Kilkenny, literally it talks about it's especially focused really hard on facial hair
yeah.
and hair, like the face, the part that you can really see. And it's the reasoning is given right in the statute. It says in order to prevent confusion with the
Mm,
enemy, right? And so apparently what had been happening is you have all these Englishmen who were going native,
mm,
and so they've got, probably, I'm going to assume they've got beautiful big bushy beards, and
yeah.
they've got curly flowy hair, down to their whatever. And they then, when the patrols are out in the Pale,
Mm,
trying to make certain that these raiders aren't getting up to trouble, because Philip, you know what the Irish were doing, right? They were going into the Pale and they were taking things.
mm.
So
Well,
so they
the cows need to be free, Rachel. You
the
need to
cows need to be.
understand
That's
this.
right. The
In
cows,
Ireland, yeah,
free the cows.
yeah, you see, this is the thing, right? Is that in Ireland we had a cattle raiding culture which was
Yep.
led by the Kerns. We used to have Kerns, which were professional cattle raiders in Ireland, also known in the mythology as the Fenian. And around the period of February, just come around this time, all the way up to November and Halloween, they would go out and steal from each other's cattle. This was all a part of the banter. This was a good laugh and a good giggle. But the English didn't think it was so much of a laugh when their cows were being robbed.
They did
So
not.
yeah, so they used to just retaliate in pure violence. Didn't get the joke of it. Like
Yeah, they, they
it's
didn't.
only
They,
good
they
crack.
no sense of humor. No sense
Yeah,
of humor at all.
what
So
the crack
so
is.
things like that are happening, and so they've got patrols out, and so the patrols are going on visual cues usually, right? So if they
Mm,
see someone who looks Irish within the Pale, these people they're getting assaulted and sometimes killed. And so what's happening is Englishmen who aren't actually doing anything wrong are
mm,
getting slaughtered by these patrols, as far as I can tell.
mm,
And so the statutes of Kilkenny, it's part of a whole packet, by the way. The statutes of Kilkenny is not just it's not just actually Ireland, because at the same time Edward III passes a whole bunch of sumptuary legislation that applies to England,
mm,
trying to rein in spending. people are spending more than they actually have on luxury goods.
Mm,
So it's part of a packet. It's not something happening in isolation. And if you read the statutes of Kilkenny that govern appearance, they talk about Englishmen must shave every 2 weeks at a
mm,
minimum. Like
yeah.
you're not allowed to actually get facial hair that is more than 2 weeks growth, because that was apparently one of the defining factors of the Irish appearance, the Gaelic Irish appearance, was to have really thick, a nice bushy beard.
Mm, yeah.
So it is, there is actually nothing about, oh, those wild Irish. They don't say that. They refer to them just as the enemy.
Performance being involved with the first invasion of 1169. So he writes it by going completely racist. And then what happens then is that there is very much, if you then go into later letters that are written from Donal O'Neill in what was it called, the North of Ireland during the Scottish War of Independence, when the Bruce invades into Ireland to fight the English, to try to open up another front against the English, because they were in a sort of funny
Mm.
stalemate inside of Scotland at the time, especially after the Battle of Bannockburn, when they were expecting a conclusion from the battle, which never happened. The English decided, we're just not going to recognize that battle. We're not going to recognize your crown. So it forces the Scottish to try to open up another front in Ireland. They were heavily allied to the Irish at the time, the O'Neills, and so they invaded into Ireland to support the O'Neills. And in it, Donal O'Neill justifies the actions of the Scottish, because you have to remember that the Bruces had been excommunicated from the papacy. So Donal O'Neill, a very well educated man, you can see that in the letters he writes to the Pope, where he justifies the Bruce invasion of Ireland, and on top of that as well, he justifies the Scottish War of Independence. Later on, the what was it called? The Scottish actually write another letter that's very much influenced by this earlier letter to the Pope. And that then goes off and inspires, because then that justifies the war not being referred to as a Scottish rebellion, but a Scottish War of Independence. And this is very important, because it's styled, later on, America styles that letter on the Scottish letter
Mm.
that's written in during the end of the Scottish War of Independence, and then that then justifies legally the American war as not an American rebellion against the British, but an American war of independence. There is major difference between a war of independence and a rebellion.
So
Uh,
yeah, and the big difference is if you win or lose.
yeah, that's the biggest one, you know.
It's all about, if you lose, it's a rebellion. If you win, it's a war for independence.
Well, you see, if you win, then you can use all those legal papers afterwards. If you lose, all that gets burned.
Exactly, exactly. Oh my goodness. Um, yeah, so there were why were the Bruces excommunicated? Probably because,
Bruce's, go on.
I
The
mean,
Bruce's,
we're talking about during the Scottish War for Independence, or
yeah.
when.
The Bruce's got excommunicated, actually, funny enough, because which family was it again? I get mixed up because there's six major families competing for the crown of Scotland at the time. And this is why, at the time, they had a very good, strong alliance with England. So they invited Edward the First and made him Lord Protector of Scotland to protect Scotland from civil war. So he sent up, he raised a large force of peasants and brought them up to Scotland with a few knights and stuff to basically be policemen while they try and sort out who was the rightful claim of Scotland, because the lords of Scotland kept having skirmishes because they were trying to play the old I have the biggest sausage, so therefore I have the rightful claim of Scotland.
Right.
So Edward the First originally was meant to be Lord Protector of Scotland. He goes up to Scotland and he enforces himself as Dictator of Scotland. So the whole thing gets chucked in the bin. And he gets them, he basically forces them to recognize the title of Lord Protector, to basically not be policeman, but be Dictator of Scotland. So the whole thing goes to hell. And they end up having a rebellion. Well, in the English interpretation, this war is a Scottish rebellion. It is not a Scottish war of independence. And from the interpretation of the Scottish, they're basically fighting to find out who should be the rightful king of Scotland, and it's not Edward the First. And so the
Right.
whole thing turns into a mess. What Bruce does is that basically from the jigs and the reels, it ends up that there's two families left, and I can. Oh, there he is. Yeah, John Conan. Uh, I just completely butchered that. I'm sorry. Um, Basically, John is the rightful king, and himself and the Bruce meet up inside of an old church, right? And they're allegedly, they're supposed to negotiate who is the next king of Scotland, because they don't want Edward the First to be king of, Scotland, of course. But between the jigs and the reels, they get into an argument. Robert the Bruce wasn't supposed to have a knife. Robert the Bruce takes out a knife and he stabs John multiple times before fleeing. This is the reason why the papacy ends up excommunicating Robert the Bruce.
That's a pretty dick move, as we
Yeah,
say in
it was.
America. That's a
It
pretty.
was.
Come
But you know,
on,
solved the
come on,
problem.
Robbie. Come on, Robbie. You be better.
But you know, it got results. I'm not going to say anything because I'm actually a huge Bruce supporter. So
I mean, but
it got
seriously, be better,
results.
man. Come on. You don't want your heroes to be assholes.
Yeah. Well, it got
Yeah,
results. What
so
can I say?
so Cassandra makes a comment that he stabbed him in the church, question mark, question
Yeah.
mark, question mark. Well, Philip, how often is it that people get killed in churches in the Middle Ages? Thomas a Becket, a
Yeah, we were
whole
just
a
talking
whole
about Thomas
a
Becket.
whole bunch of Italian of Italian lords and
Yeah.
wealthy, powerful people in the 15th century are killed in church. Giuliano de Medici, one of the forces, was it Ludovico? Ludovico is this? I think it's Ludovico who's assassinated in the church. One of the Montefeltros is assassinated in the church. Right? It is so common that
Mm.
this happens that in the 15th century, powerful men in Italy start wearing doublets with hidden mail
Yeah.
inside in the interstices between the lining and the outer fabric. There is an entire layer of mail hidden inside of it, so that it will hopefully deflect the knives. And they actually start wearing standards as a regular part of their clothing. For those who don't know 15th century harness terms, the standard is like kind of like a gorget made of mail that actually has a little bit of a cape to it, and they wear that under their doublet
Mm.
so that no one knows they're wearing armor. So they look like they're all casual and relaxed, but really they're expecting someone to literally stab them in the back. So yeah, in church, no less. Welcome to the Middle Ages. It was a glorious time.
Church butchery gets wild during the Scottish War of Independence because the
Yeah.
lads are already excommunicated. So what happens then is that they start, and it's not just Robert the Bruce that does it. Black Douglas, he does the exact same thing as well. He starts going into churches as well and stabbing people during mass and stuff. So this whole excommunication thing, it's sort of funny because it gives Bruce also a huge advantage because then there's no collar to keep him in line. So
Yeah.
he's basically free to chop up all of his rivals, which he does.
Yep.
And the thing is, as well, is that what was it called? Edward the First. At this point, he'd gotten very old. He was young enough when he was fighting William Wallace and trying to crush that rebellion. but that had given enough, breathing space for Robert the Bruce to start taking control. So by the time William Wallace is crushed, what was called Edward the First had gotten exceptionally old, and he actually died on the way to go up and try to crush Robert the
He
Bruce's
did. Yep.
rebellion, well, quote unquote, War of Independence. And big difference, guys. Remember, what was it called? So, what was it called? Edward the Second takes over, and I don't know. Maybe you have an interpretation of this, but for some strange reason, Edward the Second doesn't press on to crush Robert the Bruce's
He's not.
rebellion. He goes
Edward the
home.
Second is not a warrior king.
Yeah,
He's not. His queen. She's a warrior queen, but he is Isabella of France. She is absolutely a warrior queen. He is not a warrior king.
yeah.
He's a playboy. He's a playboy.
Mm.
He likes his boys. He likes his men.
He does.
He I mean, yeah, I mean it's it would have to be with a very naive filter that you would look at his interactions with men and say, nah, he wasn't actually gay. Oh, he was gay. Now,
Yeah,
does that mean he didn't have sex with women too? No, but he definitely liked his menfolk to be
yeah.
around him. And he was not a warrior. He surrounded himself with warriors,
Mm,
right? He did that. He did his boy toys were warriors, but he wasn't. He just wasn't. He was not his
yeah.
father.
Mm,
His father was a consummate warrior king, right? From his days as a prince going crusading, Edward the First was a warrior king.
mm,
But Edward the Second, no,
mm. Uh,
no,
this one's actually a good story, all right. Is how did Robert the Bruce get unexcommunicated? It was actually after his
unexcommunicated.
actually after his death.
Excommunicated.
He had made a pledge to go on a crusade to kind of clean his soul. And so what they had to do is that he passed away, and they put his heart into a cage. I think the heart is still somewhere in Scotland today. You'd have to go and check one of the castles or something. It's probably on display somewhere. But anyway, this is where the name Braveheart actually first comes up. So they put his heart into a cage, and the Black Douglas, who at this stage is quite old, goes crusading over to the Iberian Peninsula. While they're there, they get circled. They get into a battle, obviously, well,
Oh,
skirmish.
that I remember
Yeah,
this story. Yeah,
yeah,
go
yeah,
on, go
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So my interpretation, anyway, Rachel can correct me on this one, is that eventually
No,
during I'm sure it was a skirmish. He got into a skirmish anyway, and he ends up
yeah,
getting circled by a group of barbers or Moors, and they end up getting chopped up, and they held kind of a circular spear line. Anyway, a circle, basically a circle of spears, and in the middle was Black Douglas and the heart. And eventually, they all ends up getting chopped up while Black Douglas the whole time was holding up the heart. And so, because it was seen as brave heart, that's where the term brave heart actually comes from. That ends up getting used for the first movie on William Wallace's Rebellion, which was made by Mel Gibson. So Braveheart wasn't for William Wallace; it was actually for the heart of Robert the Bruce during the Iberian Crusade from the Scottish.
yeah. Reconquista.
Mm,
Yeah, it's funny how everyone thinks of the Crusades. They no, your average person anyway
mm,
only thinks of the Levant, the Middle East, right? They
yeah.
don't they don't realize that there were crusades happening all over Europe.
Mm,
There's the Albigensian Crusade. There's the Crusade in the Baltic states. There's the Reconquista is considered a crusade. So there's crusade. There's all kinds of great opportunities in medieval Europe for crusading that don't involve you going near Jerusalem.
mm.
So,
It does, all right. Especially when you need to like literally go and do some light duties and then make your way quickly back to your realm to try to govern it again. Because the other one that the English were more keen to in the later period was actually the Teutonic Crusades over in
yeah, the
Persia.
Baltic
Was it?
states.
Yeah, the Baltic states. That's the
Yeah,
one.
Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. Yeah,
Mm. Yeah, so
those.
the English would rather get involved with the politics there than trying to raise that large military. Because the last one that was organized was from, actually, funny enough, Edward the First, and it was a complete and utter mess. And I didn't realize how much of a mess it
Yeah,
was until I was doing my presentation for my Patreon, and I was sitting down organizing, it's blurred. Like the Eighth Crusade, sorry, the Seventh, Eighth, and Ninth Crusade, because it was meant to be organized by King Philip of France, was an utter, complete mess. By the time
Right.
Edward the First arrives in what was it called, Jerusalem, he has no idea what he's a part of. Later on, they referred to as the Night Crusade, but at the time, Edward the First is just randomly marching around the Middle East, and he has no idea what the hell's going on. Because what happened is that a few months earlier, during the eighth, what we call now later on the Eighth Crusade,
Yeah.
Philip just left. I think he got sick or something, and he just left. He was meant to wait for Edward the First to arrive, and he just gets sick of all, and he just leaves. Right. So what happens is that Edward the First rocks up, and he has no idea what's going on, because at the same time you have the Egyptian Mamluks are just overwhelming everything, and they're nomads, and you also
Yeah.
have the Mongolians. The Mongolians have just came in, and they're flooding into the Middle East of that whole region. And so Edward the First is sandwiched between all this, and he has no idea what's going on. And so eventually he gets sick of it as well, and he just leaves. And that is the end of the Crusades. Eventually the Mamluks crush the Crusaders, and then the Mamluks go on and they beat the Mongolians, and they're one of the few
Yeah.
civilizations in the world, including the Indonesians and Malaysians. I was actually talking to someone yesterday, and I was highlighting the fact that actually the
And on a globe, that kind of means the whole thing.
Mm,
So yeah, it's only it's only several twists of fate that prevent them from reaching all the way to the west coast of Eurasia,
mm.
i.e., Europe. But they do; they're everywhere, and they become the multitude of empires that don't actually bear their name. Really, the Mughals in India, that's a Mongol empire. Uh,
Oh, yeah, you're right, actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
they take over Persia for a while. They do. Tamerlan, he's a Mongol.
But that
um,
Persian campaign is so important. One of the biggest problems with modern people is they don't understand how the Mongolian system actually worked.
yeah,
It's very true that they did take over Beijing, and they do centralize themselves
yeah,
around Beijing. But
the
for the
Yuan
most part,
dynasty.
yeah, for
Yeah,
the most part, they're actually providing a protection racket. They
yeah,
do not go in and take over settlements when they're knocking. This is so strange. This is really weird, right? Is when they knock at your door, they knock at your door as from a sales pitch point of view. Like they turn around and says, "Look, this is our deals. Aren't our deals great? Negotiate with us. We'll give you percentages off," because they're providing a service. What's the service? Protection racket. The
yeah,
Mongolians, just as the Seljuk Turks before then, you see, the Seljuk Turks, their protection racket had collapsed. And the Mongolians, they're sick of all this. And they're like, well, we provide the best protection racket in the world right now. Why don't we go out to the rest of the world and start providing our protection racket to everyone, right? And
yeah,
what ends up happening is that Persia gets insulted because Persia originally was providing, in their opinion, a very good protection racket. And what this protection racket is basically I'm a trader. I need to get all my goods to another settlement and make maximum profit, as in not being attacked, right? And then make my sale there. The problem is during the medieval period, when I try to get from point A to point B, it is being attacked, right? So I need to hire security, right? At first, during the early medieval period, this was very haphazard because the merchants themselves would hire their own mercenaries. But once you
Yeah.
got out into the middle of nowhere, the mercenaries could either turn against you or they could be poorly trained and lose the skirmish, causing you to lose your stuff, right? Then the soldier Turks, coming to the end of the early medieval period, monopolize the protection racket from India all the way to Constantinople, right? Which causes problems to the Crusades because they don't want to be paying for this protection racket, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, regardless, eventually coming to the end of the what was it called, the somewhere around the end of the 12th century, the Seljuk Turks aren't as dominant in their protection racket as they previously were. In enters the Mongolians because the Mongolians see that they're way better running protection rackets than anyone in Persia, Iraq, and what was it called, the Syrian areas, which is run by the Saracens at the time. And so they go in to try to provide a new protection racket. Allegedly, according to the Mongolian interpretation, in retaliation, the Persians are insulted by this, and so they kill Mongolian merchants and diplomats. This enraged.
Yeah. Bad
Yeah,
move. Bad move, man. Don't do it.
so this completely enrages Genghis Khan. So normally what he does is you go in there, you make a bad deal with Genghis Khan, you do something to insult him. He goes in there, kills the nobles, but that's it. He pretty much leaves the workers alone, and he especially leaves the merchants alone because the merchants want to have a protection racket that's up and going. Most of the time, it's just the nobles who are annoyed. However, this time around, when Genghis Khan takes over, what is it called again? It is the one that's in the center. Baghdad, isn't it Baghdad, led by the
Yeah,
Persian?
he burns. No, no, no. Baghdad isn't Persia at this time. That's Arabia. You're talking about
Yeah,
Tehran or Isfahan or darn it, the beautiful, beautiful city,
yeah,
the ancient city. Persepolis.
yeah.
Persepolis.
I
Wait,
think I'm
wait.
sure that one. Yeah, it is. It is. So what he does is he goes into the main capital of Persia. He goes into loads of settlements of the Persians, and he just levels them. And
I
from
mean,
there,
they do level Baghdad. Unfortunately, they burn it. They burn it to the ground. They burn it
yeah,
badly. It's the library gone. Fuck the
yeah.
Mongols. Sorry, excuse my language.
No, they just go in there and they just wipe it. It's funny because we do on right now in social media, there's a massive push to justify the Mongolian invasions and stuff, but I still don't see any massive justification for the Mongolians in Persia. What they did in Persia was wild. I understand where Genghis Khan was coming from, but at the same time, very, 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 very difficult to justify. I can understand if they went in there and killed key merchants that were against the Mongolians and also the main lords. But geez, like the level
I
of
mean, the
damage, you know?
the reality is that even okay. So I try never to judge people, historical figures, by modern mores.
Mm.
That's an exercise in futility. However, we know that even in the era when this happened, contemporary peoples all across Eurasia thought that Genghis Khan's brutality in Persia was over the top, right?
Mm.
You know you've done wrong when everyone else thinks, wow, that's pretty cruel.
Mm.
In an era where torture all
Yeah.
across Eurasia, where torture is the standard form of interrogation,
Mm.
right? When everyone thinks, yeah, it's okay to torture people to get answers out of them, and then they still look at what Genghis Khan did and go, ooh,
Yeah.
you know it's bad. You know
Mm.
it's bad. It's
Mm.
objectively bad.
100%. Were the okay? This is what's really important. We'll talk about nomads and certain relations. What's very, very interesting from both Beijing and New Dubai is that New Delhi in India, is that people of that area will all, and it's the same thing in Constantinople as well, is that people constantly, constantly, constantly justified themselves as being civilized city people. We are the people of the city. We're not like those uncivilized people out in the
Right.
wilds, right? And you
Yeah.
see that attitude in Beijing when they're looking over the wall and they're seeing those
They
Huns and the
do.
Mongolians. And what's very, very interesting is from the get go, from the early medieval period onwards in Beijing, is they're actually related. I only found out about this recently when I went over to Taiwan, is that Beijing is heavily related to the Turks. And I was like, no way. I thought they were a pure breed Chinese because that's the image that China constantly appears.
Yeah,
No,
they want you to think they're all Han Chinese, right?
yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
They
they
are
do.
massively, massively, hugely mixed with the Turks. I'm talking about the people who are also related to the Seljuk Turks going between India to Constantinople. They are related to them. And I was like, no way. The world is smaller than you think. I didn't realize they were both. And also, on top of that, as well, China is also related to the Huns, both the ones that are popping up around the Hungary area and in the north of China as well. And I was like, no way. That is
Nomads
absolutely
get around,
wild.
buddy. Nomads get
Yes, they
around,
do, don't they?
literally.
And it's so funny because, this kind of attitude of us civilized city people, I always thought at first it was a Roman interpretation. I didn't realize Beijing had the same interpretation as well. And on top of
They
that,
did.
it's complete and utter hypocrisy because they're all related to those nomads outside the
Yeah.
wall. They're literally cousins. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. It's brilliant. Like, don't get me
Well,
wrong, but it makes
well,
the
it's,
world feel much smaller.
it's the sequence of things, right? There's a nomadic peoples who do their nomad thing, and then they eventually encounter a civilization, and they look at their way of living, and they look at like this beautiful shiny city with its
Mm.
plumbing and its beautiful buildings and all of its amenities, and they think to themselves, huh, we could do that. That could be us. And then
Yeah.
they settle down into the city that they conquer. But
Mhm.
they keep living in that city basically the way the people lived before. This happened in Rome. Like all of those nomadic groups that came from China, that came from
Mhm.
the steppes, they came through and they're like, ooh, Rome, what a beautiful city.
Yeah.
Let's just take it over. But they didn't sack it. They didn't burn it to the ground. No, they wanted to live in it. They wanted the
Mhm.
amenities. And so
Yeah.
they stopped being nomadic peoples. And eventually they become the city people who look over the walls at the next wave of nomads,
Mm.
with an arrogance in their eye and a smugness in their step, right?
Mm.
It's the sequence of life in human
It is
civilization.
wild because you see the same thing happening in Delhi as well, as you guys are pointing out, that you have the Muslim Mongolians who eventually
Yep,
settled in New Delhi, was it Delhi
yep,
as well?
yep.
Sorry, I keep mixing up New Delhi in there because that's the one that New
You
Delhi was
just
built
call it
during the
Delhi.
Mughal. Yeah,
I
Delhi.
mean, New Delhi and Old Delhi are all now kind of one. So just call it
Yeah.
Delhi.
Yeah. But yeah, Delhi it was at the time was the one of the main areas, main hubs for India. India is quite complicated because it is
Yeah,
exceptionally large. So you
yep,
have multiple factions and also multiple ethnic groups that do appear. So I
yep.
always try to centralize the conversation around Delhi most of the time. It's the same thing in China. I try to centralize the conversation around Beijing.
Beijing. Yeah,
Yeah, sometimes that can be quite difficult because they do, once there's a form of centralization going on, sometimes they'll move the capital. But for the most part, when it comes down to China, I'll centralize the conversation around Beijing. And it's the same thing in India as well, where I'll try to, centralize the conversation in Delhi because I find the conversation very, very complicated because I do not specialize in India and Chinese history. And there's just, the detail is insane,
well, I mean,
especially when they're so good at record keeping.
and what is now China was not always China.
Yeah.
And what is now India was not always India. So,
Mm,
and I don't even mean that by name. I mean in terms of the area that is now governed hypothetically by one central government
mm,
was not always. Those weren't always the borders. Those weren't always the
mm,
boundaries. And
yeah,
what is an Indian, right? Like
yeah.
even in India, that is a very tricky question today.
Massively.
So,
Because that ethnic fighting, there's massive ethnic
oof,
fighting
it's
constantly in China. Was it, sorry, I would say China. I mean, India.
yeah.
And it's not just in the north of India. Like we have a very good example there between the people of Delhi, the Hindus fighting against all these nomads going in and out, and who's
Yep.
defining each other as like, you know, one minute you've got a nomad who suddenly starts, oh, well, I'm a Hindu. I've always been a Hindu. So my mother's side, completely ignoring his father's side. On my
Right.
mother's side, I'm related to so and so. That means I've always been a Hindu. I don't know what you're talking about. But the
Yep.
same problems pop up in the south, even worse. Like I don't think we can go into detail on YouTube
Yep.
about the ethnic problems are popping up in the south of India during that period. Never mind in the modern context of it,
Yeah.
and
It's yeah.
it's yeah, and it's even more complicated again in the, and it's actually really fun actually in the east of, what was it called, India, where you have, what was it called, oh my god, you know, do you know the name of this again, the country that appears out of it, thinking of
Wait,
it now,
out of which part? Which
on
direction of India?
the east side of India.
You talking about you talking about Bangladesh?
Bangladesh, that's the one. Yeah, Bangladesh that appears. Oh, that's, I actually think that's really fun to study and read. Because of those rivers. What happens is that that's very mountainous and it's very rivers,
Yeah.
and they have a very complicated relationship. So the invaders come in, which are the Muslims, but the Muslims cannot kind of pull the merchants out. So they actually have to make these agreements with the merchants, and they end up having this weird hybrid religion between Buddhism, Hinduism, and
Yeah.
Christianity, where they end
Yeah.
up having, what was it, Muslim saints. They end up having Hindu and Muslim saints, which I don't know anywhere else where Muslim and what was it called, Muslim and Hindu saints appear. And also some of those Muslim and Hindu saints are originally Buddhist saints as well, originally Buddhist gods and stuff as well. So it ends up this weird hybrid that's appearing up in the east side of India at the time, which is so fun to read up and study. And that's down to the fact that the land up there, because it's mountainous and riverous, the rivers itself work as a great hub for merchants and stuff to move around the place, but it's also a really great defense for protecting the merchants up there. So they end up having to make those agreements and stuff. They're well defended until the British come up and the British ruin everything around there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah. And then the British draw the lines,
Yeah.
right? Then the British draw the lines, and thus the mess that is the modern Middle East is born.
Yes.
If you all ever want to see a really funny skit about the Brits drawing colonial Brits drawing lines on maps, look up Daily Show John Oliver British Empire maps. He did a
Mm.
skit back in the aughts, that back before John Oliver got his own show, that is absolutely it. It lays it out, everything you need to know about why the Middle East and Southern Asia are a mess.
Yeah.
Just it's there. It is hysterical, but it makes you cry at the same time.
It's so annoying because
Yeah.
Bangladesh history is actually really fun and interesting to read because you've constant invaders going in there and just making these weird agreements with the merchants, and the merchants having this weird interpretation of the wider world. Um, but then the British arrive and they start building their forts. They don't have any permission to build forts because the original permission was that they would build a port to connect themselves with the Bangladesh merchants, which makes perfect
Right.
sense. But then, just completely out of the blue, they start building forts. And India is like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you building this port? But
Right.
the Bangladesh merchants really shoot themselves in the foot because the Bangladesh merchants were arming the Indian military at the time. So the British military make an agreement with the Bangladesh merchants. And so the Bangladesh merchants don't arm the Indian military. So when they arrive, the Indian military, they end up collapsing because they're not armed, they're not paid. And so
Right.
the India, which has a humongous modern military force. This isn't a backwards people with a bunch of sticks and swords. No, no, this was a full blown modern army there to crush the British army.
Right.
Completely collapsed on the day. The day itself, because nobody was paid, nobody had any proper arms on them, you know, because there was no money for arms. So most of the
Right.
what was it, the Indian army, the modern Indian military just walked up and left. They were like, well, you know, there's nothing in it for me. I'm going home. And that's what they did. And so there was only volunteers and royalists actually fought the British, which also were not up to date. So the actual Indian army, which was meant to be a modern army, completely collapsed. I'm not sure what happened. I haven't actually sat down and read what happened to the Ming Dynasty, why they couldn't compete with the British. But
Oh, so the
yeah, it's
Ming, so
interesting.
it's but the Ming are out by the time the British king come along. It's the Qing. So
Yeah.
The Ming dynasty collapses because there's a series of famines and floods at
Mm,
the end of the Ming dynasty that just basically make it makes it feel like everyone basically thinks that heaven has revoked its mandate. Like
mm,
the Ming, that's oh, these emperors, yeah, they clearly no longer have the support of heaven. And
mm,
of course, in China and the Middle Kingdom, as it was called by a lot of different people, it was very crucial that the emperor have the mandate of heaven. And
mm.
so at the end of the Ming dynasty, there's just this series of like disasters that they can't
Yeah.
control for the most part, earthquakes and floods. And I mean, to be fair, from what I've read, they actually, the Ming emperors really, then the administration tries hard to counteract the effects of that, but it's just too much. It's too big.
Mm,
And so that opens the door for the Manchus to come in and basically take over. And so
mm,
then it's the Qing. Now, why the Qing don't can't stand up to the Brits? I haven't actually. It's been a while since I've looked into that, but I don't know. My impression is that that situation, they China started getting weak in the 15th century when the early Ming dynasty emperors decided to close everything down, right? When they shut their borders down, when they scuttled the fleet of discovery, where they stopped trading really, where they stopped allowing people to come in and out. And so that brought innovation to a screeching halt in China.
mm.
They started looking inward instead of outward. And that's when they started losing their technological edge. So it started in the 15th century, and it just
Mm,
that just had a knock-on effect. And Korea did the same thing after the Imjin War at the end of the 16th century. When Japan laid waste to the Korean Peninsula, and then the Manchus, the Qing, come in, and they also wreak havoc in the early 17th century. After that, Korea shuts its borders down and it kind of turns itself into the hermit kingdom,
mm.
and that starts its own. You can't growth as a nation, power as a nation is generally predicated on interacting with other peoples, with
Mm,
allowing new ideas to come in, capitalizing on those new ideas, incorporating innovation into the way you do things. And the second you shut your borders down and look inward instead of outward is the moment where you start falling behind everyone
yeah,
else, right?
that's true.
So same thing. I haven't looked into it in great detail, but my general impression is if you look at China in its most powerful, which I would say is the Tang Dynasty,
Mm,
honestly, I would say
mhm,
its real big heyday is the Tang Dynasty in the first millennium. If you look at the way it interacted with the world around it, it was like completely open,
mm,
right? There's people coming in and out, merchants coming in and out, new ideas coming in and out, freaking Christian missionaries coming in and out. And because of all of that flow of ideas and technology and peoples, it's what the Tang Dynasty capitalized on all of that.
mm.
So the second when you shut your borders down, generally that's when the end starts for most polities.
Yeah, but it's trying to always find the right balance and stuff. But it's another conversation for another day for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, what was it called? We'll finish up there before we get too complicated with our conversation. And I just want to advertise before I go away. I just want to advertise my Patreon, if Rachel doesn't mind, of
Yeah, yeah. Go,
course. Is my
go for it.
Patreon? Obviously, I don't have in Ireland next Monday is June bank holiday, so we will be taking that day off on my Patreon for my presentations and stuff. But when we get back, we will continue my presentations on the Scottish War of Independence. Now, don't feel that you're behind on anything. You can easily jump onto my Patreon now, and I've got recordings of everything I have covered so far in the Scottish War of Independence, and then way more presentations as well, covering the entire history of Ireland from 410 all the way up to the 13th century. So there's tons and tons and tons and tons of recordings in there. Um, if you jump onto my Patreon, you can donate whatever you feel like to keep the old channel going, the lights on, as you can see here. But if you want to jump on and be a part of the presentations and stuff, including live events and stuff, that is about 20 quid a month, which you get tons and tons of stuff with that. Okay, so that's over my Patreon at Irish Medieval History. So definitely head on over there. Rachel, just out of curiosity, do you have anything going on this week or anything?
Yeah, so actually, quite a bit. So if you want to support, uh, my research into daily life in the Middle Ages, how people lived, recreating and reconstructing it, and experimenting in medieval life, then you can check out my Patreon. It's actually, I have channel membership, I've got Facebook subscription, I think it's called, and we have Patreon. Of all of those three, Patreon is the one that gets me the most of your money. By the way, guys, YouTube memberships, I found out they take a 30% cut of
Mm,
your membership fees. And if you're on paying with an iPhone with Apple through the Apple system, they take a 60% cut because apparently there are Apple fees, Apple Pay fees, and so those get passed on to the creator.
mm,
So the way to get, if you'd like to support me, the way to make sure most of your money supporting me gets to me, it's on Patreon.
mm.
Patreon is also where I actually have the most perks for people. There's tons of extra videos that no one else gets to see, full hour tutorials on dancing, on sewing, on a wide array of topics. I share all kinds of extra resources with my patrons, my channel members, and my subscribers. And you get access to my Creative Contessa Discord server where I share new resources as I stumble across them in my daily research on a regular basis. So if you'd like to support and would like extra perks, consider becoming a Patreon, a channel member, or a subscriber on Facebook. Yeah, Apple is a thief, 100%, 1,000,000%. Apple is absolutely a thief. But this week, Philip, there's an exciting new exhibition opening here in
Oh,
Korea. It's one of the reasons I'm here right now.
nice.
The 45th Special Folk Costume Exhibition
Oh,
at Dankook University's Seokjusan Museum, which is the largest collection of historical Korean clothing in the world.
mm,
And they have also the most of it actually on display because most museums don't display their collections, they just have them
uh,
in the archive, so you never get to see them. But
yeah.
at this museum, you can actually see them, and it's a special exhibition. So there's going to be, this Friday's the grand opening. There's going to be lectures being presented by experts in the field of historical Korean clothing, presenting new research. So we're going to be attending that, and I'm hoping to do a live stream tour of the museum. That will be on Friday my time, which will be late Thursday Americas, but early in the morning in Europe. Yeah, so if you can't tune in for the live, you can at least catch the recording. Hopefully the reception will be better. We shall
I know,
see. We
right?
shall see. And then on the weekend, I have a medieval cooking party planned. We're going to be exploring a recipe, Philip, that connects medieval Italy to Persia and the
Oh,
Middle East because
nice.
it's a recipe. It's pomegranate chicken. It reads almost exactly like the recipe for fezanjan,
Mm.
which is a pomegranate chicken stew, basically
Oh,
from
nice.
Persia. But it has one little added difference that definitely makes it Italianized, and
Mm.
that is the addition of fatback, pork fatback.
Nice. I do
Right,
like
so you
pork.
can,
It's so good.
yeah, you can tell, and it's even called Romania, but
Mm.
not like the
Oh,
modern country of Romania.
yeah, yeah.
Ruman is the Arabic word for pomegranate. So
Oh, that's
even the
interesting.
name harkens back to its Arab or Persian origins.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll be covering that this Sunday morning, Seoul Standard Time, Saturday evening at my medieval cooking party. So check it out, guys.
Nice. For
Yeah.
sure. Other than that, guys, thanks very much, and I'll see you guys later. Slán go